now. Hello, my name is Cindy Speaker. Welcome to our Facebook Live broadcast. I'm delighted to have with me today David Daggett, attorney David Daggett of Daggett Shuler Law. Not only is David an attorney, but he is an Ironman triathlete, which is very impressive to me. He's competed in 185 triathlons. I believe 27 were Ironman triathlons, and 7 of them were the Hawaii World Ironman Triathlon. So, David, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Cindy.
Did I get those numbers right?
You were close.
I was close? Okay. Because I've known you for a while, and the numbers keep going up. I just am so impressed with the consistency of what you do and the discipline that you have. So really pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we were both young kids at one point.
Yeah, that's right. Many moons ago. Many moons ago. Well, today we're going to talk about a difficult subject, and that is traffic fatalities, some of the fatal accidents that we're seeing. And I want to start off with a quote to frame our discussion. And let me get this right. According to the National Safety Council, in 2016, over 40,000 people were killed in motor vehicle crashes. And talk to us a little bit about how that number compares to previous years.
Well, that number's been reported recently in the New York Times with an article, Wall Street Journal with an article, places like that. The significant part is this is 2 years in a row with rather large increases. And if you look at the combination of the 2 years, it's been 50 years since we've had that kind of jump. And it was interesting because of that. I went back and looked at the history of highway traffic deaths, which is actually kind of fascinating because deaths on our highways started at the end of the 1800s, progressed through the 1900s, reached several peaks through the years. The mid-1960s, there was a peak. That's when automobiles were being mass produced. They were more affordable to the masses and that sort of thing. And then there was a quick drop in the mid 1960s. Do you remember what happened then? Because I remember, Cindy.
What's that?
Seatbelts became mandatory.
Of course. Of
course. Yeah, before that, we had cars that didn't have seatbelts in them.
Yeah, yeah.
So seatbelts became mandatory. And in fact, in the 1960s, we got up to more than 50,000 highway deaths per year for a couple years. Seatbelts get mandatory in cars, and all of a sudden what we saw was the number of deaths started inching down. Then, when you and I were young, we'll recall that we just had one car in a household.
Right.
There weren't 2 cars and 3 cars in households. It just was. When I was growing up, that just didn't happen.
Exactly.
When mom needed the car during the day, we drove dad to work and she kept the car, but it was one car. Yeah. Interestingly, in the 70s, we then came with 2 cars and more per household, a lot more driving, a lot more miles. The number of deaths went up again.
Yeah.
Then we saw in the 90s, we saw some safety features coming. And so we saw anti-lock brakes, airbags, those sort of things. And then all of a sudden, the number of highway deaths start going down again. And they went down for quite a number of years until the 2010s, 11s, and 12s. It started flattening out at the bottom. And then all of a sudden, we've seen this tremendous spike. Now, interestingly, from my point of view, is my monologue too long?
No, it's great.
No.
It's
okay.
Great.
So interesting from my point of view. What's a little bit kind of paradoxical is during that same period of time, you're starting to see safety features on vehicles. And what happens is they start on more expensive vehicles and they start trickling down. But cars don't have to be real expensive anymore to have most of the safety features. Most cars now have backup cameras. Well, the big thing that's come out in just the last few years is cars now have sensors, and these don't have to be exotic cars. The sensors will automatically brake for you to avoid a collision. If you're backing up and something's coming, the cars will automatically brake for you. Cars now have a pedestrian warning system. It'll automatically brake if it's going to hit a pedestrian. Lots of cars, Hondas, have the lane. If you go out of the lane, you get a beep or a buzz, or the steering wheel vibrates to let you know you're veering out of your lane, which prevents a lot of deaths when people are falling asleep and those sort of things. So you would think with all those features, some of which have just become sort of mainstream in the last 18, 24 months or so, you wouldn't expect this spike in highway deaths. The one thing that is happening is we are all more distracted while we're driving. I mean, some cars have two screens. Honda Odyssey minivan has two electronic screens, one above and one below.
Wow.
Your phone is connected through the car, your GPS systems, all those sort of things. They're just as distracting as picking up your phone or putting on your lipstick or combing your hair or whatever else you do while you drive. So I think as a society, we have to learn to deal with these distractions as we tend to get more and more electronics. And as you know, and as I know, the electronics we're dealing with, that's not going to slow down. That's going to increase.
Sure.
That's going to increase. It was interesting. As you know, I'm pretty well connected with our medical school here in town, and I was at a medical school presentation on trauma. And you typically think of trauma as, somebody falling down or, an untoward injury at work or those sort of things. Interestingly, the doctor making the presentation talked about we have an epidemic in this country, and it's an epidemic that nobody's talking about, that the biggest form of trauma that's causing serious injuries is automobile accidents. So,
how about that?
Yeah. So that's the largest piece of trauma. And I got in trouble once when I use this analogy, and I don't mean this disrespectful at all, but 9/11 was one of the worst days in our country's history.
Yes.
And the numbers and the deaths are staggering, and they really get our attention. On the highways, we have that same number of deaths every month after month after month.
Wow.
It's not as startling to, and please, I'm not taking anything away from 9/11.
Of course.
But the thing that happens is when you have incidents that occur one at a time, our psychology, and we're so numbed by the news. I don't know about you, but I've had it with the news lately. But we're so numbed by the news that one instant in a time doesn't quite set off the alarms in our brain. Now, when there's a school bus accident, you're dealing with a lot of kids, you hear about that because the multiples connect in our brain. But we've become so numb as a society to things that happen, one and two at a time, over and over and over, that we lose track and lose attention of it. So highway traffic deaths is a serious issue that we really ought to be aware of. And then on top of that are the many, many times more injuries that occur on our highways. The other thing is estimates are that a little bit over a third of all of our motor vehicle accident deaths involve some form of drinking and driving. So you put drinking and driving, all of our electronics, other distractions that we have, the busyness of our roadways, and we need to use extreme caution out there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's
So
interesting.
I don't know how
Because
long we've been on, but that was an answer to one question. So
I think, no, that's great. And you covered a lot of ground there. But
yeah,
it's interesting because, and you and I both love technology. I love technology, but
sure.
there's no doubt that there's some unfortunate ramifications of
Yeah,
being in
very.
such a technologically advanced world. It's interesting because another advancement that we see are things like Uber and Lyft and soon self-driving cars. But I've used Uber a few times, and I'll tell you, it just doesn't seem. It's interesting because in the early days of Uber, I would get a driver that was holding his cell phone in his hand
Hmm,
as he's trying to
right,
navigate, and I'm thinking,
right.
well, I don't know about this. Now they typically have a brace, but still, we used to use. I remember when I grew up, my parents got a map out and they charted where they're going when we went on
Sure,
vacation. And now people are
sure,
following a device as
sure.
they travel. So I mean that there's huge distraction that comes along with the wonderful
Right.
um, parts of technology. It's an ongoing problem.
Well, Uber is based on the GPS system in the smartphone. So hopefully the drivers have it mounted just like your GPS in your
Right.
car is. That's still a distraction.
It
So
is.
I tell you what I typically do is, and I just had this last Saturday. I had an Uber driver. But I was going to an event and I had to be there early, and so that my wife and I could ride home together, I took the Uber. But
Okay.
I gave the driver directions. I said, "You don't need to look at that. I will give you directions, and I know the directions better than what your phone does." And so, I gave him directions. The other nice thing that Uber has done recently, and this isn't to, promote Uber over Lyft or
Sure.
vice versa. This is just to inform our viewers,
Right.
because historically, and particularly after that incident that occurred up in Michigan and those sort of things, people have been real concerned about Uber cars getting in wrecks and what's
Yeah.
the insurance and all that sort of thing. So Uber doesn't insure the vehicle, but what Uber does is purchases excess insurance coverage that interestingly kicks in whenever the app is activated. So when the driver is actually in the middle of a service run, the app is activated during that call. I mean, that's the technology on which Uber's based. During that period of time, Uber has a policy that kicks in and provides insurance up to $1 million. That's important, particularly
Yeah.
in North Carolina and other places in the country. In North Carolina, over 75% of all drivers have the minimum coverage, which is $30,000 worth of coverage. So having that kick in at $1 million is important. The other important piece of that is it's my understanding that the Uber insurance that kicks in also includes uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. That's a whole nother topic, but
Right.
briefly, that means if your Uber car gets hit by another car that does not have insurance, you have uninsured insurance coverage that kicks in. If they hit you and they don't have enough insurance, you have underinsured insurance kicks in that fills that gap between the coverages. And we can talk about insurance coverages another day, but
Right. Right.
just want people to know that I think that the consumer in the marketplace has forced a reaction from Uber to provide that insurance coverage.
Hmm.
So I think
And
that's
that's not
important.
a and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, no, it's
But
a good thing. It's a
yeah.
good thing.
Right.
And I mean,
So
that's the way society tends to evolve, and
yeah.
that's the way the legal system tends to
Yeah.
help the society evolve.
But what we're talking about here are when you just start to talk about that, these are very complex issues, and I think one of the things, and you deal with these types of incidents and accidents every day, but talk to us a little bit about, okay, you're in your family, maybe you have a family member that is in a fatal crash or a serious crash. Every crash is serious, right? But what are the steps to take? What do they do? Because you've got to have some help with these things. No average person, as myself, could work through all of these complex legal and insurance related issues.
No, it's very difficult to work through those issues. And you always have to remember that there's an insurance company on the other side. The insurance company has professionals that they do this for a living, and not to knock them, but their job is to pay out as little money as possible.
Right.
And, we hear all sorts of horror stories in that regard of things that insurance companies might do to pay out as little as possible. The other thing is, some of us have either been through a situation or we just tend to be a little bit more knowledgeable and understand how the system works. We get lulled into thinking that everybody knows how the system works, and most people don't.
Right.
These issues are very, very complicated. Just on insurance coverages alone, we could line up books that cross my entire office with the interpretation of insurance laws.
Yeah.
And so it's very, very complicated. So my recommendation is always get a consultation to see what type of situation you're in and how complicated it is.
Yeah.
We do that. We actually give a lot of free consultations, and kind of our mantra that we go by is, and this isn't proper English, but if we can't do more better for you than you could have done for yourself, we just give you free advice on how to handle it and you go on your way.
Yeah.
But typically the issues are much more complicated than that, and you need somebody with expertise involved.
Yeah. Yeah. David, if someone does have a question, they find themselves in one of these difficult situations, how can they reach your office? What's the best way to go about that?
Well, our website, daggett.shulerlaw.com. Call us. I think our phone number is 336-724-1234. I think it's important, and I don't want to underestimate the how valuable important information is.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can bring this up or not, but your family went through a tragedy.
We did. My father was killed by a drunk driver, and we really didn't know what to do. And so my mother, as you know, my mother, who worked all her life, wonderful lady, and there was no lawsuit or anything like that, because when we grew up, and this was a while ago, you kind of didn't sue. You just feel like you didn't. What I realize now is we should have been taken care of. My father had 5 children that were left behind, and people they don't realize that this is part of your rights.
Right. And so I know your mother. She's a beautiful lady, hardworking lady, worked her entire life, had a good life with your father, not a wealthy family,
right?
A good life. And then this tragedy occurs. She didn't know what to do.
That's right.
She was uninformed, basically didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And she endured, and the 5 children endured quite a hardship.
Yeah.
That could have been at least lessened to some degree had she had access to valuable information.
Well, let me tell you something interesting that you may not know. And this really, when I got into the legal industry, it really bothered me, because the insurance agent that my family had was one of the, kind of a good old boy, somebody that'd been a friend of the family for years.
Sure.
And do you know that he came to my mother and gave her a check for $1,000? That's what he did. But the fact is, he was trying to dissuade her from going any further because we're friends. And I think insurance companies, you've seen it, they do those kinds of things. They give you some small amount, and then you're kind of done with you don't even realize that you've just signed your rights away.
Now, we've heard some horror stories. Some of the insurance companies have what they call quick hit squads. And what these quick hit squads are is to get out there fast, give a check for less than what the claim is worth, get a signed release, it's over, and the case is done.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in that situation, they never even know
Right.
that they got taken advantage of. They may still be out of work and losing wages. They may be stuck with ongoing medical bills or ongoing expenses of different sorts. And
Yeah.
it's quite a hardship, not just on the person, but their entire family. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we've seen it where lives are just shattered,
Yeah.
both by the emotional side and then also on the financial side because they didn't know what to do.
Well, I think it's great that your law firm, and I've seen this over the years. We've known each other for a long time now, but you've done in the past,
Don't tell our age.
no, I won't do that. But you've done educational materials just to educate people that maybe are not in a situation where they need to get a lawyer, but they need information. And I really
Sure.
applaud you for that
Sure.
because you do that all the time. You just give them, guidelines and
Sure.
help them know where
Sure.
to go,
Sure.
even when a lawyer's not involved. So that is an important reason. I'll tell you, if I lived in North Carolina, which I don't, I'm in Pennsylvania. But, well, it's interesting because after this, we're going to talk about somebody in my family because you're always giving me, helping guide us as to what to do. And I think that anybody that has any kind of a car accident or a serious injury, it just makes sense to give your firm a call because it's very helpful to have somebody that's knowledgeable about these topics, whether or not a lawyer-client relationship evolves.
Right now, we have a tremendous team with good people, and I'm proud of them all.
You really do. Well, we've been on for a while. This is fun. I always love talking to you, but we better close it out here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, I'm
words?
just sorry. I'm sorry I strayed so much, but
No.
It's a motor vehicle on the highway is a serious situation. We need to take it seriously. Please be safe out there.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody.
Cindy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Okay. Good talking to you all on Facebook Live. We'll see you again in a week or so. Thanks a lot and have a great rest of your day.